It was meant to be a normal Wednesday lunch. The salad was half eaten, the garlic bread still steaming in its basket, the kind of casual family meal you'd never think twice about. Then she said it. My daughter, her voice sharper than the knife beside her plate. "You're financially useless, Dad." The words didn't echo. They landed with a finality that made the silverware seem suddenly too loud against the ceramic. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My fork paused midway to my mouth. Across from me, my daughter's husband, Aaron, didn't even look up. He just stared into his glass of water, swirling the ice cubes as if they held some escape from this moment. I set my fork down slowly, not from weakness but because silence in moments like this carries more weight than any immediate reaction ever could. They mistook my silence for surrender. They assumed I would swallow this insult like I had apparently swallowed their perception of me over the past 3 years. Their sideways glances when bills arrived, their whispered conversations about Dad's financial situation, their offers to help that always felt more like handouts than genuine support. But they were wrong about me, and they would soon discover the cost of mistaking my quiet dignity for weakness. The dining room fell into that particular kind of stillness that makes every sound feel amplified. The hum of the refrigerator. The ticking of the antique wall clock I'd restored years ago. The distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. I could feel my heartbeat, steady and calm, despite the insult still hanging in the air. Outwardly, I remained composed, my expression giving away nothing as though I hadn't heard the verbal slap. My daughter, Rebecca, shifted in her seat with a small, satisfied smile. The kind people wear when they believe they've finally said aloud what everyone was thinking. Aaron finally glanced up, meeting my eyes briefly. There was no apology there, no embarrassment for his wife's words, just the empty gaze of a man who had chosen sides long ago, and it wasn't mine. That look cut deeper than Rebecca's words ever could. I placed my napkin beside my plate with deliberate care. "Excuse me," I said, my voice level and controlled. No one moved as I pushed my chair back. I walked out onto the back porch, the afternoon sun warmer than I expected. The garden I'd planted and maintained for decades spread before me, rows of vegetables and flowering plants, a small ecosystem I had created with my own hands. From my pocket, I pulled the worn leather wallet I'd carried for 30 years. Inside was my banking app, untouched for weeks, its notifications silenced. The wallet was a gift from Rebecca's mother on our 10th anniversary. "For the man who always provides," she had written in the card. I had carried it through college fund payments, mortgage installments, medical bills, and family vacations. Through decades of careful saving and investment that had given my family the life they enjoyed. And now here I was, standing on the porch of the house I had paid off 15 years ago, being called financially useless by the daughter whose entire education I had funded. I thought back to the day Rebecca graduated from business school. How proud I had been, watching her walk across that stage, knowing the financial acumen she had inherited from me would serve her well. "I'll make you proud, Dad," she had said that day, hugging me tight. "I'll show you I was worth every penny." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What had changed since then? Perhaps it was when her investment firm began to take off, or when Aaron's tech startup secured its first round of funding. Success had come quickly to them both, and with it, a new perspective on my more traditional approach to money. My conservative investments, my reluctance to leverage debt for growth, my insistence on emergency funds, all suddenly seemed outdated, even foolish to them. I opened my wallet app, the balance still substantial despite my uselessness. Years of disciplined saving and careful investment had built a fortress they knew nothing about. Not because I had hidden it, but because they had never bothered to ask. Too caught up in their own financial philosophies to consider that mine might have merit. The sliding door opened behind me. Aaron stepped out, his expression uncomfortable. "Rebecca didn't mean it that way," he said, though we both knew she had. "She's just frustrated that you won't let us help modernize your portfolio. You're leaving money on the table with those old-school investments." I closed the app and returned the wallet to my pocket. "Not everyone measures success by the same metrics," I said simply. He sighed, that particular sigh of the young explaining to the old. "Look, we just want to help. Your generation didn't have the tools we have now. The market's different. Traditional saving isn't enough anymore. I leaned against the porch railing, studying him. Aaron was bright, ambitious, and completely convinced of his own financial brilliance, despite having only experienced a bull market. "And how much cash reserve does your company maintain?" I asked. He blinked, caught off guard by the question. "That's different. In business, you have to leverage capital for growth. Cash sitting around is inefficient." "Indeed," I replied. "Efficiency and security often find themselves at odds." He shifted, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Rebecca's waiting. Are you coming back in?" I nodded and followed him inside. The dining room had been cleared, dishes already in the dishwasher. Rebecca sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up when I entered. "Dad," she said, still focused on her screen, "Aaron and I have been talking. We want to set up a meeting with our financial advisor for you. Gerald is amazing. He's helped our portfolio grow 30% this year alone." I took my seat again, folding my hands on the table. "That's a generous offer, but I'm comfortable with my current arrangements." She finally looked up, exasperation evident. "That's exactly the problem. You're too comfortable. You could be doing so much more with your money. Instead, it's just sitting there, doing nothing." "Money that sits is money that's ready when needed," I replied. She rolled her eyes, the gesture so reminiscent of her teenage years that, for a moment, I saw the girl who used to ask me to check her math homework. "That's such old-school thinking. Inflation is eating your savings alive." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but hunger isn't the only risk in life." The conversation shifted after that, moving to safer topics, a neighbor's renovation, an upcoming community event. But the undercurrent remained. In their eyes, I had become a financial dinosaur, stubbornly clinging to outdated methods while the world raced ahead. That evening, after they left, I sat in my studies surrounded by the financial records I'd maintained meticulously for decades. Portfolios, property deeds, insurance policies, all organized with the same care I'd applied to every aspect of my financial life. My late wife had teased me about this room, calling it my money cave, but she had appreciated the security it represented. I pulled out my laptop, logged into accounts that Rebecca and Aaron knew nothing about. Diversified investments across multiple platforms, rental properties managed through a corporation, treasury bonds, precious metals, a financial ecosystem built carefully over a lifetime. Conservative by their standards perhaps, but stable, resilient. I opened my email and composed a message to my longtime financial advisor, Margaret. Unlike Rebecca's flashy Gerald, Margaret had guided me through bull and bear markets alike, her advice always tempered with caution learned from experience. "Need to discuss contingency options," I wrote. "Recent developments suggest it's time to activate Plan B." Margaret's response came within minutes, despite the late hour. "Suspected this might be coming. Documents ready on my end. Meeting tomorrow?" I confirmed the appointment and closed the laptop. The house settled around me, creaking softly as old houses do. From my desk drawer, I withdrew a small leather notebook, its pages filled with my handwriting. Financial lessons I had hoped to pass to Rebecca someday, when she was ready to listen rather than instruct. I had always believed that wealth was not just about accumulation, but about wisdom, knowing when to grow, when to preserve, when to give, when to withhold. Rebecca had mastered accumulation, but the wisdom still eluded her. And wisdom, unfortunately, rarely arrives before it's needed. The next morning, I rose earlier than usual. The sunrise painted the kitchen in golden light as I prepared coffee. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Major tech correction looms. Analysts warn of overvaluation. I read the article carefully, noting the companies specifically mentioned. Aaron's startup wasn't among them, but several of its key investors were. At 9 o'clock precisely, I arrived at Margaret's office. Unlike the sleek, modern spaces Rebecca's financial crowd favored, Margaret worked from a converted Victorian home, its interior warm with wood paneling and comfortable furniture. "James," she greeted me, rising from behind her desk. At 72, she had the sharp eyes of someone who had watched markets rise and fall many times over. "I've prepared the documents we discussed last quarter. Are you certain this is the direction you want to take?" I settled into the chair across from her. "Recent events have convinced me it's necessary. Rebecca and Aaron have made their perspectives clear." She nodded, unsurprised. "They're not the first young people to mistake a bull run for financial genius. But are you sure you want to go this far?" "I'm not doing this to punish them," I explained. "This is about protection. Theirs as much as mine, though they don't see it yet. Margaret pulled out a folder, spreading documents across her desk. The trust is structured as you requested. Your assets remain under your control during your lifetime, with specific disbursement conditions thereafter. The educational funds for any future grandchildren are separate and secured. I reviewed each page carefully, making small adjustments where needed. By noon, everything was finalized. What I had built over a lifetime was now protected, not just from external threats, but from the very people I had built it for, at least until they learned what wealth truly meant. As I left Margaret's office, my phone rang. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Hello, Rebecca." Her words tumbled out, tight with anxiety. "Dad, have you seen the market today? There's a major correction happening in tech. Aaron's investors are pulling back funding for the next round. We might need to access some capital quickly." The irony wasn't lost on me. Less than 24 hours after being declared financially useless, I was now the first call when stability was needed. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said calmly. "What did Gerald suggest?" A pause. "He's not answering our calls this morning." Of course he wasn't. The Geralds of the financial world are often mysteriously unavailable when markets turn. "I see. Dad." Her voice softened, the edge of panic making her sound young again. "I know what I said yesterday was harsh. I didn't mean it. But we might need some help just to bridge things until the market settles." I stopped walking, standing still on the sidewalk outside Margaret's office. Part of me wanted to point out the irony, to let the lesson sink in deeply, but she was still my daughter, panic evident in her voice. "I'll be home in 20 minutes, I said. "Come over and we'll discuss options." When Rebecca arrived, she was alone. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by the tense expression of someone watching carefully constructed plans crumble. We sat in the kitchen, the same table where she had dismissed my financial relevance just a day before. "How bad is it?" I asked. She pushed her hair back, a nervous gesture from childhood. "Bad. Aaron's company needs a cash infusion to make payroll while the next funding round is renegotiated. Our personal investments are down almost 40% since yesterday. The margin calls started this morning." I nodded unsurprised. "Margin calls, the inevitable consequence of borrowing to invest during a bull market. And your emergency fund?" She looked away. "We reallocated it 3 months ago into a high-yield opportunity Gerald recommended, which has now evaporated." I finished for her. A nod, her eyes still averted. I rose and went to my study, returning with a single sheet of paper. I placed it before her. "Do you know what this is?" She frowned, scanning the document. "It looks like a bank statement?" "It's the education fund I started for you the day you were born. Each month, a portion of my income went here, regardless of other expenses. It paid for your schooling from kindergarten through your MBA." Her fingers touched the paper gently. "I didn't know you kept records going back this far." "I keep everything," I said simply. "Now let me show you something else." I opened my laptop, logged into an account, and turned the screen toward her. Her eyes widened as she took in the balance. "Is that my sitting around doing nothing money?" I confirmed, "though as you can see, it's been quite active over the years." She stared at the screen, then at me. "But you never talked about having this kind of, you live so simply. Your car is 10 years old. You buy store-brand groceries. Wealth isn't what you spend," I told her. "It's what you keep, what you grow, and what you protect." I closed the laptop. "Now, about your situation. I'm prepared to help, but not in the way you might expect." /quote. Rebecca straightened, hope visible in her expression. "What do you mean?" "I won't simply transfer funds to cover the shortfall. Instead, I'm offering you and Aaron a loan, structured, documented, and secured." "A loan? But Dad, we're family." "Precisely," I said. "And family deserves the respect of proper financial arrangements. The loan will have reasonable terms, below market rate, but with specific covenants about future financial behavior." She frowned. "Covenants? Like what?" "Establishment of a true emergency fund, reduction of leverage in your investment strategy, regular consultations with both your advisors and mine." I paused. "And financial literacy sessions with me, weekly, for the next 6 months." Her pride flared momentarily. You want to give us financial lessons, after all we've accomplished? What you've accomplished is significant, I acknowledged. But yesterday you called me financially useless. Today you're at my table asking for help. There's a disconnect there that needs addressing. She flushed, looking down at her hands. For a moment, I saw the little girl who had once come to me crying after breaking a neighbor's window with a baseball, needing help to make things right. Those are my terms, I said quietly. Take them to Aaron, discuss it, and let me know your decision. Rebecca left shortly after, the bank statement still clutched in her hand. I didn't know what she would decide, but I had set the stage for what might be the most important financial education of her life. That evening, as the sun set over my garden, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The market would recover eventually. Aaron's company might survive or it might not. Rebecca and Aaron might accept my terms or find another solution. But regardless of what happened next, the careful financial foundation I had built over decades stood firm. Like me, quiet, but far from useless. The lights of a car swept up the driveway. Rebecca and Aaron emerged, both looking tired but resolved. As they approached the porch, I saw in Rebecca's hand a folder, the kind used for important documents. Perhaps, I thought, this was the beginning of wisdom after all. Rebecca and Aaron stood on the porch, their silhouettes framed by the fading evening light. I gestured to the chairs beside me, inviting them to sit. The weight of the folder in Rebecca's hand seemed to pull her down as she settled into the wicker chair, her posture a mixture of defeat and determination. We've discussed your offer, Rebecca said, her voice steadier than it had been earlier, and we'd like to accept it. Aaron nodded, his usual confidence dimmed. It makes sense, he admitted. More sense than the alternatives we've been exploring all afternoon. I nodded, taking the folder Rebecca now extended. Inside were their financial statements, brokerage accounts, credit lines, mortgage documents, business loans, all laid bare. The picture they painted was one I had suspected. Aggressive growth, minimal safety nets, and leverage upon leverage. A financial house of cards that had begun to collapse. Thank you for your transparency, I said, closing the folder after a thorough review. It's the first step toward rebuilding. Aaron leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I still don't understand how you saw this coming. Everyone in our circle, said this bull market had years to run. History rarely announces its repetition, I replied, but it does leave clues for those willing to look beyond the current enthusiasm. Rebecca's fingers twisted together in her lap. The thing is, Dad, we need the funds quickly. Our margin calls are due by market open tomorrow, and Aaron's company payroll runs on Friday. I stood, motioning for them to follow me inside. In my study, I unlocked a drawer and removed a different folder, this one prepared during my meeting with Margaret. These are the loan documents, I explained, laying them on the desk. The terms are, as I outlined earlier. The interest rate is 3% below prime, with a 5-year term. The covenants are detailed in Section 4. They bent over the papers, reading carefully. Aaron's eyebrows rose as he reached the covenant section. Weekly financial sessions? Approval rights on major investments for the duration of the loan? Mandatory emergency fund equal to 6 months of expenses? Those are my terms, I said simply. They're non-negotiable. Rebecca looked up, a flash of her old defiance crossing her face. This feels controlling. It's protective, I corrected. And it's considerably more generous than what any bank would offer you in your current situation. Quote, Aaron placed a hand on Rebecca's arm. He's right, Beck. We don't have many options right now. The moment hung between us, my daughter wrestling with pride, necessity, and the remnants of yesterday's certainty that I was financially obsolete. Finally, she reached for a pen. Where do we sign? After signatures and notarizations were complete, I moved to my computer. The funds will be in your account within the hour, enough to cover the margin calls, the payroll, and establish the required emergency fund. Rebecca watched as I executed the transfer, her eyes widening slightly at the ease with which I navigated between accounts. I didn't know you were so digital, she admitted. There's a lot you don't know, I said, not unkindly. That's part of what these weekly sessions will address. Aaron stood by the window, staring out at the darkening garden. What happens now? He asked, his voice quieter than usual. Now, I said. You stabilize. Meet your immediate obligations. Then we begin the process of restructuring your approach to money. Not just how you invest it, but how you think about it. Rebecca nodded, relief and exhaustion washing over her face. Our first session. When should we come back? Saturday morning, I replied. 9 o'clock. Bring breakfast. I'll provide the coffee in the first lesson. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca lingered in the doorway of my study. Erin had already gone ahead to start the car. Dad, she said hesitantly, I'm sorry about what I said, about you being financially useless. It was cruel and wrong. I looked at my daughter, successful, ambitious, but standing now at the edge of a financial precipice she had helped create. Apology accepted, I said, but words matter less than actions. Show me you've learned something from this, and we'll consider the debt paid in full. She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears, then turned and walked down the hallway. I listened to the front door close, then the sound of their car pulling away. The house settled into silence around me. I returned to my desk, reviewing the loan documents once more before locking them safely away. The first step had been taken. Whether it would lead to lasting change remained to be seen. The following morning, I woke to news alerts buzzing on my phone. The market was in freefall, with tech stocks particularly hard hit. I brewed my coffee and settled in my favorite chair by the window, watching as birds visited the feeder in my garden. The contrast wasn't lost on me, nature's economy continuing undisturbed while human financial systems trembled. My phone rang. Margaret's name appeared on the screen. You were right, she said without preamble. It's worse than 2008 in some sectors. How are Rebecca and Erin holding up? They've accepted help, along with my conditions, I replied. The funds transferred last night. Just in time, Margaret noted. Several brokerages are restricting margin accounts today. If they'd waited until morning, they would have faced forced liquidation. I finished. I know. Your timing was impeccable, she said. As usual. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and checked my accounts. Despite the market turmoil, my portfolio showed only modest declines, the result of diversification, hedging strategies, and significant cash positions that had seemed so inefficient to Rebecca and Erin just days ago. I spent the morning in the garden, the physical labor of weeding and pruning a welcome counterpoint to the financial calculations that had occupied my mind. By noon, I decided to check in. I called Rebecca's cell phone. She answered on the first ring. Dad? She sounded breathless. Have you seen the news? I have, I confirmed. How are things on your end? The transfers came through just in time. Our broker called this morning to say they're no longer extending margin to any clients. If we hadn't covered yesterday... Her voice trailed off. And Erin's company? A deep breath. The payroll will go through tomorrow as planned. But 2 of our major investors have pulled out of the next funding round entirely. We're meeting with the board this afternoon to discuss options. Keep me posted, I said. Remember, panic makes for poor decisions. Take your time, consider all angles. After we hung up, I returned to my gardening, the rhythm of the work calming. Physical creation had always balanced financial management in my life. A lesson Rebecca had yet to learn. Her world was screens, numbers, and abstract growth. Mine included the tangible satisfactions of seeing things built, grown, and maintained by hand. Saturday arrived with a clarity that seemed almost mocking given the financial turbulence of the past days. At precisely 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Rebecca and Erin stood on the porch bearing bags from a local bakery and dark circles under their eyes. Rough week? I asked, ushering them inside. Erin gave a hollow laugh. You could say that. The company's on life support. We've had to lay off 30% of the staff just to extend our runway. In the kitchen, I poured coffee while they arranged pastries on a plate. Rebecca seemed subdued, her usual energy dampened. Dad, she said, stirring her coffee absently. I want to thank you again. Your loan, it saved us from complete disaster. I nodded, acknowledging her gratitude without dismissing it. It was a first step. Today, we begin the next phase, understanding how you got here and how to build differently going forward. I led them to the dining room table, now covered with financial statements, charts, and several old leather-bound ledgers. Rebecca's eyes widened at the display. "What is all this?" "Your first lesson," I explained. "We're going to start with fundamentals, then work through your specific situation." For the next 3 hours, I guided them through what I called the architecture of financial security, the principles that had governed my approach to money for decades. We began with the concept of true wealth versus apparent wealth, explored risk management beyond mere diversification, and discussed the psychology of financial decision-making. Rebecca, despite her MBA and professional success, found herself taking notes like a student again. Aaron, whose tech background had given him a different perspective on value creation, asked surprisingly insightful questions. "This ledger," I said, opening one of the oldest books on the table, "contains my financial records from the year your mother and I bought our first home. Notice the allocation percentages, how they balance growth, security, and what I call sleep at night, money." Rebecca studied the careful entries, her expression thoughtful. "You were only making $32,000 a year then, but you still managed to save 20%. Wealth is built on habits, not income," I replied. "High earners go bankrupt every day because they focus on accumulation without understanding preservation." Aaron pointed to an entry in the ledger. "What's this column labeled Future Wisdom?" I smiled, pleased he had noticed. That was money set aside for mistakes not yet made. Everyone makes financial errors. The key is to anticipate them and limit their impact. As the morning progressed, I could see small shifts in their thinking. Questions became more reflective, less defensive. When we finally moved to their specific situation, they engaged with a humility that would have been unimaginable just days before. "The first thing we need to do," I explained, reviewing their updated statements, "is triage. What must be saved, what can be restructured, and what should be allowed to fail." Aaron winced at the last category. "You mean like my company?" "Possibly," I acknowledged. "But that's a decision that requires careful analysis, not emotional reaction. Sometimes what seems like failure is actually the foundation for something more sustainable." By early afternoon, we had drafted a comprehensive recovery plan, a roadmap that would guide their financial decisions for the coming months. It wasn't easy medicine to swallow. Some investments would need to be liquidated at a loss. Lifestyle adjustments would be necessary. Aaron's company would require fundamental restructuring if it had any chance of survival. "This feels austere," Rebecca admitted, reviewing the final document. "It's realistic," I corrected. "And temporary. Financial rehabilitation, like physical rehabilitation, isn't meant to be comfortable. It's meant to be effective." As they prepared to leave, Rebecca paused at the door. "Next Saturday, same time?" I nodded. "Bring your progress updates and questions." "And Rebecca, start keeping your own ledger. Not an app, not a spreadsheet, a physical record in your own handwriting. There's power in that connection to your money." The weeks that followed established a new rhythm. Each Saturday, Rebecca and Aaron arrived, progress reports in hand. We reviewed, adjusted, and planned. I shared more of my own financial history, not just the successes, but the mistakes and recoveries that had shaped my approach. By the third session, changes were already visible. Rebecca had started her ledger, its pages filling with the kind of thoughtful entries that indicated real engagement rather than mere compliance. Aaron had restructured his company, pivoting to a more sustainable business model with reduced overhead and more realistic growth projections. "We've established the emergency fund," Rebecca reported during our fourth session. 6 months of expenses, just as required." "It feels strange having that much sitting in a low-yield account. How does it feel when you wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about money?" I asked. She considered this. "Actually, I've been sleeping better." "That's the return on that particular investment," I told her. "Not all yields can be measured in percentages." As market conditions gradually stabilized, our sessions evolved. We moved beyond crisis management to more nuanced discussions of wealth building, legacy planning, and the philosophy of money. I shared my own estate arrangements, the trusts, the charitable foundations, the provisions I had made for future generations of our family. "I had no idea," Rebecca admitted during our 8th session. "All this time, I thought your finances were just simple, conservative. I didn't realize there was such complexity behind your approach. Simplicity on the surface, complexity in the structure, I explained. Like an iceberg, what people see is just the visible portion of a much larger, more substantial reality. Aaron, who had been quietly reviewing some documents, looked up. "That's what we got wrong," he said suddenly. "We built for show. The visible success, the rapid growth, the impressive returns. But underneath, there was no real structure, no foundation to weather a storm." I nodded, pleased by the insight. Exactly. True financial strength isn't measured during fair weather. It's revealed during storms. By our 12th weekly session, nearly 3 months after that fateful lunch when Rebecca had called me financially useless, the transformation was remarkable. The loan was being repaid according to schedule. Their restructured finances were showing resilience. Aaron's company, though smaller, had found a sustainable path forward. More importantly, their approach to money had fundamentally shifted. Rebecca no longer chased aggressive growth at the expense of security. Aaron had developed a healthy skepticism toward the move fast and break things ethos of his industry. Together, they were building something that could last. "I think we're ready to discuss graduation," I announced at the beginning of that session. Rebecca looked surprised. "Graduation?" "From these formal weekly lessons," I clarified. "You've met all the covenants of the loan agreement. You've implemented the strategies we discussed. You've demonstrated not just compliance but understanding." Aaron and Rebecca exchanged glances. "But we still have so much to learn," she protested. "Financial education never ends," I agreed. "But the formal structure of these sessions has served its purpose. From here, we can meet monthly, then quarterly, more as family than as teacher and students." After they left that day, I walked through my garden, reflecting on the journey of the past months. The financial crisis that had brought Rebecca and Aaron to my doorstep had been painful, yes, but also necessary. Sometimes wisdom can only be built on the foundation of humility. That evening, I sat in my study, reviewing my own ledgers. I turned to a page I had written the day after Rebecca had called me financially useless. At the bottom, I had noted, "Goal," not to prove her wrong, but to help her see differently. I picked up my pen and added a single word: accomplished. The next morning, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Rebecca standing alone on the porch, holding a package wrapped in simple brown paper. "May I come in?" she asked. "I wanted to give you something." In the living room, she handed me the package. I unwrapped it carefully to reveal a leather-bound book, similar to my own ledgers but new, its pages blank except for the first one. There, in Rebecca's handwriting, was a title: "Lessons from My Father, a Financial and Life Journal." Beneath it was a simple dedication: "To the man who taught me that being financially useful isn't about what you earn or spend, but about what you understand and share. With love and eternal gratitude, Rebecca." I closed the book, running my hand over its cover. "Thank you," I said simply. She smiled, that bright, genuine smile I remembered from her childhood. "No, Dad, thank you for being silent that day when I said those terrible words. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. And it taught me more than any immediate reaction ever could have." As she left, I placed the journal on my desk beside my own ledgers, the old and the new, experience and potential, side by side. The cycle of financial wisdom continuing, as it should, from one generation to the next. 6 months after Rebecca had called me financially useless, autumn painted my garden in shades of amber and gold. The market had stabilized, though not fully recovered. Many aggressive investors had been wiped out entirely, while those with more conservative approaches were slowly rebuilding. It was nature's financial cycle playing out as it had countless times before. I sat on my porch enjoying my morning coffee when a sleek black car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. Rebecca emerged, dressed not in her usual corporate attire but in casual slacks and a light sweater. She carried a folder and what looked like a small gift bag. "Unexpected visit," I remarked as she climbed the porch steps. "Everything all right?" She smiled, settling into the chair beside me. "More than all right, actually. I wanted to share some news in person rather than waiting for our monthly check-in." I gestured toward the coffee pot on the small table between us. She poured herself a cup before continuing. "Two things," she said, her excitement barely contained. "First, Aaron's company just secured new funding, not venture capital this time, but a strategic partnership with an established firm. Slower growth, sustainable metrics, real value creation." "That's excellent news," I replied, genuinely pleased. Aaron's pivot from chasing unicorn status to building a sustainable business had been painful, but necessary. He must be relieved. "More than relieved," Rebecca said. "He's energized in a way I haven't seen in years. It's like he's rediscovered why he started the company in the first place." She paused, sipping her coffee. "And he specifically asked me to thank you. He said your sessions helped him understand the difference between financial success and financial sustainability." I nodded, acknowledging the distinction. "And the second piece of news?" Rebecca's expression softened. She placed the folder on the table and slid it toward me. "Open it." Inside was a series of documents. Bank statements, investment accounts, a property deed, and what appeared to be incorporation papers for a new entity. Generations Wealth Advisors, LLC. I looked up, questioning. "I've left the investment firm," she explained. "I'm starting my own financial advisory practice, focusing on intergenerational wealth planning and financial education." Her eyes brightened with purpose. "I want to help families build the kind of financial foundation you built for us, one that can weather any storm." The revelation surprised me. Rebecca had been on a fast track at her firm, positioned for partnership within years. "That's a significant change," I observed. "Are you certain?" She nodded firmly. "More certain than I've been about anything in my career. The crisis we experienced, and your guidance through it, showed me what truly matters in finance. It's not just about returns or beating benchmarks. It's about security, purpose, and legacy." I studied the incorporation documents more carefully. The mission statement caught my eye: to build financial structures that create security across generations, emphasizing education, prudent risk management, and values-based wealth preservation. "You've put considerable thought into this," I noted. "I have," Rebecca confirmed. "I've been planning it for months, ever since our graduation conversation. I wanted to make sure everything was in place before I made the leap." What struck me most wasn't just the career change, but the methodical approach she had taken, researching, planning, establishing reserves before making her move. The very principles we had discussed in our sessions were evident in how she approached this transition. "I'm impressed," I said simply, "not just with the decision, but with how you've implemented it." She smiled, a quiet confidence in her expression that reminded me of her mother. I had a good teacher. Rebecca reached for the gift bag she had brought and passed it to me. "This is just a small token of appreciation." Inside was a wooden nameplate, beautifully crafted of oak with brass lettering. "James R. Harrison, Senior Advisor." I raised an eyebrow, questioning. "I'd like you to join me," she explained. "Not full-time. I know you value your freedom, but as a consulting advisor, sharing your wisdom with clients who could benefit from it. Your experience spanning multiple market cycles is something no amount of academic credentials can replace." The offer was unexpected. After a lifetime in corporate finance followed by careful management of my own portfolio, the idea of sharing that knowledge more broadly was appealing. "I'll consider it," I said, turning the nameplate in my hands, "on one condition." "What's that?" "That you don't put me in a corner office just to impress clients. I've spent enough time in sterile corporate environments." Rebecca laughed. "Deal. Actually, I've leased a converted Victorian downtown. Reminds me a bit of Margaret's office. Wood paneling, comfortable furniture, a place where people can talk about money without feeling intimidated." We spent the next hour discussing her business plan. She had approached it with the same careful consideration that now characterized her personal finances: conservative projections, adequate reserves, clear value proposition. She had already signed 3 clients, former colleagues, who had witnessed her navigation of the market crisis and were impressed by her resilience. "There's something else," she said as our conversation wound down. "Something I've been meaning to ask you." I waited, curious. "Why did you help us?" she asked softly. "After what I said that day, after how dismissive we'd been of your financial approach, you could have let us learn the hard way. Many parents would have." I considered the question carefully. Do you remember when you were 10 and you insisted on climbing that maple tree in the backyard? She nodded, a smile playing at her lips. You told me it wasn't safe, and you climbed it anyway, I continued. When you fell and broke your arm, what did I do? You took me to the hospital, she said. You didn't lecture or say, I told you so. You just made sure I was okay. Exactly, I replied. Financial lessons are no different. My job wasn't to prevent you from making mistakes. That's impossible. My job was to be there when you needed help recovering from them and to guide you toward better decisions going forward. Rebecca's eyes glistened slightly. I wish Mom could see this, what we've built from that terrible moment. She sees, I said quietly, and she'd be proud of you, not just for recovering from a financial setback, but for growing through it. After Rebecca left, I sat with her offer, turning the nameplate in my hands. The idea of sharing financial wisdom beyond my immediate family held appeal. Throughout my career, I had mentored younger colleagues, but always within the constraints of corporate objectives. This would be different, focused purely on helping families build lasting financial foundations. 2 weeks later, I found myself in a converted Victorian downtown, much as Rebecca had described. The office that bore my nameplate was modest but comfortable, with large windows overlooking a small garden. On the wall hung framed copies of my earliest ledgers, artifacts of financial discipline that had weathered multiple crises over decades. My role was limited but fulfilling, meeting with select clients, particularly those navigating significant transitions or recovering from financial setbacks. I didn't discuss modern investment algorithms or cryptocurrency trends. Instead, I focused on the timeless principles that had guided my own journey: disciplined saving, thoughtful allocation, risk management, and the psychology of financial decision-making. Many clients arrived skeptical, particularly the younger ones. They expected outdated advice from someone who didn't understand modern finance. What they found instead was perspective, the kind that comes only from having weathered multiple financial storms and emerged intact. What I offer isn't a strategy for beating the market, I explained to a young couple during one consultation. It's a framework for ensuring the market doesn't beat you. Rebecca's practice grew steadily, not with the explosive growth her previous firm had prioritized, but with the measured pace of something built to last. She selected clients carefully, focusing on those who valued education and long-term planning over quick returns. Aaron, meanwhile, had transformed his company. Gone was the growth-at-all-costs mentality that had nearly destroyed it. In its place was a sustainable business model focused on genuine value creation. The company was smaller than he had once envisioned, but it was profitable, stable, and positioned for meaningful growth. 6 months into my advisory role, Rebecca invited me to lead a seminar for all of her clients and their families, including children as young as 10. The topic: Building Financial Wisdom Across Generations. The event was held in the community room of the local library, a fitting venue for education. As I looked out at the audience, faces young and old, all eager to learn, I felt a profound sense of purpose. Financial wisdom, I began, isn't about knowing which stock will rise tomorrow or which cryptocurrency will explode next month. It's about understanding the principles that govern wealth over time, principles that remain constant whether you're dealing with gold coins, paper currency, or digital assets. I shared stories from my own journey, the market crashes I had survived, the opportunities I had both seized and missed, the balance I had struck between growth and security. But mostly, I focused on what money is and isn't. Money isn't wealth, I explained. It's a tool for creating and preserving wealth. True wealth includes security, opportunity, legacy, and the freedom to live according to your values. Financial decisions should serve those ends, not just the accumulation of more money. The seminar lasted 3 hours, with surprisingly engaged participation even from the youngest attendees. When it concluded, several families approached with questions, comments, and gratitude. One elderly gentleman pulled me aside, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said, "I've been to dozens of financial seminars over the years. Most focus on getting rich. Yours is the first I've attended that focused on staying whole." His observation stuck with me. In a financial world obsessed with accumulation and growth, the principles of preservation and purpose were often overlooked. Yet they were the very foundations upon which lasting financial security was built. That evening, Rebecca hosted a small dinner at her home for her staff, Aaron, and me. As we gathered around the table, the same table where she had once called me financially useless. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. "I'd like to propose a toast," Rebecca said, raising her glass, "to lessons learned, to wisdom shared, and to financial foundations that can weather any storm." We clinked glasses, and Aaron added, "and to having the humility to recognize when you're wrong, something I'm still working on daily." The conversation flowed easily, touching on business, family, and the changing financial landscape. What struck me most was the balanced perspective now evident in both Rebecca and Aaron. They still pursued growth and opportunity, but with a newfound appreciation for security and sustainability. Later, as the evening wound down, Rebecca showed me something she had kept private until now: her current financial ledger, meticulously maintained in her own handwriting just as I had suggested months ago. "I review it weekly," she explained, turning the pages. "Not just the numbers, but the patterns, the decisions, the lessons. It's become almost meditative." What caught my eye wasn't just the careful record-keeping, but the final column on each page labeled Wisdom Gained. Here, Rebecca had noted insights, reflections, and principles distilled from each financial period. "I borrowed this concept from your Future Wisdom column," she admitted. "But instead of setting aside money for mistakes not yet made, I'm recording wisdom from experiences already navigated." It was an innovation on my approach, one that reflected her unique perspective while honoring the underlying principle. In that moment, I realized that true financial wisdom isn't merely passed down. It's evolved through each generation's unique experiences. The following weekend, I invited Rebecca and Aaron to my home. When they arrived, I led them to the study, a room they now knew contained the financial architecture of our family's security. "There's something I want to share with you," I said, unlocking a drawer I had never opened in their presence. Inside was a leather portfolio, worn with age, but carefully preserved. "This belonged to my father," I explained, opening it carefully, "and to his father before him." Inside were financial records dating back to 1923, handwritten ledgers, stock certificates, property deeds, and letters discussing investment philosophy during the Great Depression. Generation after generation had added to this archive, each contributing their hard-won financial wisdom. "I never showed you this before," I explained, "because financial wisdom can't be inherited. It must be earned through experience. You needed to face your own financial crisis, make your own mistakes, and discover your own path to understanding." Rebecca turned the yellowed pages carefully, reading the notes her great-grandfather had written during the market crash of 1929. "The lessons are the same," she observed with wonder. "Different era, different technologies, but the fundamental principles haven't changed." "That's the point," I replied. "Financial vehicles evolve, markets change, but human nature, our relationship with money, risk, and security, remains remarkably constant." True financial wisdom acknowledges this consistency. Aaron studied a letter dated 1932, written during the depths of the Depression. "Your grandfather was incredibly optimistic here, even after losing so much," he noted. "He understood the cycle," I explained. "Downturns are inevitable, but so is recovery, if you've built a foundation strong enough to weather the storm." I closed the portfolio and handed it to Rebecca. "This belongs to your generation now. Add to it, learn from it, and someday pass it to your children, but only when they're ready to receive its lessons." She accepted it with visible emotion. "I'll honor it," she promised. That night, after they had gone, I sat in my garden watching the stars emerge. The financial journey that had begun with a painful insult had transformed into something far more valuable than money could measure: a restoration of financial wisdom across generations. In the quiet darkness, I thought about the nature of true wealth. It wasn't measured in dollars or market returns, but in security, purpose, and the wisdom to distinguish between what money can and cannot provide. Rebecca and Aaron had discovered this truth through crisis and recovery, as had I in my time, and my father before me. Financial storms would come again. They always do. Markets would rise and fall. Economies would expand and contract. New financial instruments would emerge, while others faded into obscurity. But the principles that had guided our family for generations would remain constant, providing not just financial security, but something far more valuable: the wisdom to navigate uncertainty with confidence and purpose. As I looked up at the vast night sky, I felt a profound sense of contentment. The most valuable asset I would ever pass to my daughter wasn't money or property, but the financial wisdom she had now made her own. Wisdom that had transformed her from calling me financially useless to building a life and career dedicated to sharing those very principles with others. Some lessons can only be learned through adversity. Some wisdom can only be gained through experience. And sometimes, the most powerful response to an insult isn't immediate defense, but the patient demonstration of truth through action. In remaining silent that day at lunch, I had set in motion a journey that spoke louder than any words could have, a journey that had transformed not just Rebecca's finances, but her understanding of what true wealth really means. 2 years had passed since Rebecca had called me financially useless at that Wednesday lunch. The garden outside my window now bloomed with spring flowers, a cycle of renewal that mirrored the transformation in our family's financial journey. I sat in my study reviewing quarterly reports, not just my own investments, but the growing success of Generations Wealth Advisors. Rebecca's firm had expanded thoughtfully, adding 3 advisors who shared her philosophy of intergenerational wealth building. They now occupied the entire Victorian building downtown, each office reflecting the warm, approachable environment she had envisioned. My role remained part-time but deeply rewarding, meeting with clients facing complex transitions and mentoring younger advisors on principles that transcended market cycles. The doorbell rang, interrupting my review. I wasn't expecting visitors. When I opened the door, I found Rebecca standing there, holding the hand of a small boy, my grandson James, named after me but called Jamie to avoid confusion. At 4 years old, he had his mother's determined expression and his father's curious eyes. "Surprise visit," Rebecca said, smiling. Jamie wanted to see his grandfather's garden. "I hope we're not interrupting." "Never," I assured her, kneeling to greet my grandson. "The garden's at its best right now." "Perfect timing." Jamie's eyes widened as he entered the house. "Is this where the treasure is?" he asked solemnly. Rebecca laughed at my confused expression. "I've been telling him stories about your study, how it contains treasures of family wisdom. He's taken it quite literally." I smiled, seeing an opportunity. "Well, Jamie, there are different kinds of treasures. Want to see one of them?" He nodded eagerly, and I led them both to my study. From my desk, I retrieved a small wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl, a gift from my own grandfather decades ago. Jamie watched with rapt attention as I opened it. Inside was not gold or jewels, but a single silver dollar from 1922, worn from handling but still gleaming in the sunlight streaming through the window. "This was given to me by my grandfather," I explained, carefully placing it in Jamie's small palm, "and to him by his father. It's been passed down through 5 generations of our family." Jamie turned the coin carefully, examining both sides. "Is it worth a lot? In dollars?" "Not particularly," I admitted. "But in value? It's priceless." This coin survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and countless personal challenges. It reminds us that real wealth endures through difficult times. Rebecca smiled at the impromptu lesson. "Dad's always teaching, even without trying," she said to Jamie. "That's one of the things I love most about him." We spent the morning in the garden, Jamie helping me plant new flowers while Rebecca shared updates about the firm. The most significant news was a recent opportunity, a partnership with a local university to develop a financial literacy program for young adults. "The Dean of Business approached us specifically," she explained, pride evident in her voice. "He said our intergenerational approach was exactly what students needed, not just investment theory, but practical wisdom about building financial foundations." "That's a significant responsibility," I noted. "Teaching young minds about finance at such a formative stage." "It is," she agreed. "That's actually part of why we came today. I'd like you to lead the lecture series. No one can explain these principles more clearly or with more credibility than you." The request surprised me. Public speaking had never been my passion, and academia felt far removed from my practical experience in corporate finance and personal investing. "I'm not sure I'm the right person," I admitted. "My approach is practical, not theoretical. These students need academic rigor." Rebecca shook her head firmly. "That's exactly why you're perfect. They get plenty of theory in their regular classes. What they need is someone who has actually weathered multiple market cycles and emerged stronger, someone who can translate financial principles into real-world wisdom." Jamie had wandered a few feet away, fascinated by a butterfly landing on one of the flowers we had just planted. Watching him, I found myself thinking about legacy in a broader sense. Not just what we leave to our families, but what we contribute to future generations we'll never meet. "I'll consider it," I said finally. "Send me the program outline and we can discuss specifics." Later that afternoon, after Rebecca and Jamie had left, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically our relationship had evolved since that painful lunch 2 years ago. From financially useless to being asked to share financial wisdom with university students, the transformation was remarkable. The following week, I visited the university campus to meet with the dean and review the proposed curriculum. The business building was modern and impressive, with glass walls and sleek furniture, a stark contrast to my more traditional approach to finance. "Mr. Harrison," the dean greeted me warmly, "we're honored you're considering this role. Rebecca speaks so highly of your financial philosophy." "I'm intrigued by the opportunity," I replied honestly. "Though I must admit, my approach may seem outdated to young minds accustomed to fintech and cryptocurrencies." The dean smiled knowingly. "That's precisely why we want you. Our students get plenty of cutting-edge theory. What they lack is perspective. Understanding how financial principles remain constant even as instruments evolve. After the market correction 2 years ago, many realized that innovation without foundation leads to instability. We spent the next hour reviewing the proposed curriculum. Rather than traditional lectures, the format would be conversational. More like fireside chats where I would share real experiences navigating various financial environments and respond to students' questions. We want them to see the human side of finance, the dean explained. Not just algorithms and models, but the psychology, the ethics, the real-world impact of financial decisions. By the end of our meeting, I had agreed to lead a 6-week series titled Enduring Financial Wisdom in a Changing World. Each session would address a different aspect of financial life, from building security to managing risk, from ethical investing to legacy planning. As I left the campus, I found myself energized by the challenge ahead. Teaching had never been part of my career plan, yet it seemed a natural extension of the mentoring I had always done, first with younger colleagues, then with Rebecca, and now with her clients. The first session was scheduled for early September, giving me the summer to prepare. I approached it methodically, reviewing my own financial journey and extracting principles that remained relevant despite changing economic landscapes. Rebecca proved an invaluable partner in this process. Once a week, we met to refine my presentation approach, ensuring the wisdom remained accessible without being oversimplified. Aaron occasionally joined these sessions, offering the perspective of someone who had built and nearly lost a business before rebuilding on stronger foundations. "Students will connect with your story," Rebecca assured me during one of our preparation meetings. "Not because it's dramatic, but because it's authentic. You've lived these principles, not just theorized about them." When September arrived, I found myself standing before a lecture hall filled with 80 students, faces young and diverse, all staring with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. The dean introduced me briefly, highlighting my corporate career and subsequent advisory role, but deliberately omitting mention of my personal wealth or investment success. "Good morning," I began, setting aside my prepared notes. "I'm not here to tell you which stocks to buy or which cryptocurrencies might explode next month. I'm here to discuss something more fundamental: how to build financial security that withstands whatever the market throws at you." I shared the story of my own financial journey, beginning with lessons learned from my grandfather during the aftermath of the Great Depression. I explained how those principles had guided me through multiple recessions, inflation crises, tech bubbles, and housing collapses. "Financial instruments change," I told them. "Markets evolve. Regulations shift. But certain principles remain constant: living below your means, maintaining adequate reserves, understanding the difference between investments and speculations, recognizing the psychology that drives financial decisions." The students listened attentively, many taking notes. When I opened the floor for questions, hands shot up across the room. The inquiries were thoughtful, challenging, and occasionally skeptical, exactly what I had hoped for. One young woman near the front raised her hand. "With all due respect, sir, isn't your approach too conservative for our generation? We face different challenges: massive student debt, unaffordable housing, stagnant wages. The traditional path seems impossible for many of us. It was a fair question, addressing the very real economic challenges facing younger generations. The principles remain valid, I acknowledged, but their application must adapt to current realities. You're right that your generation faces unique obstacles. That makes foundational financial wisdom more crucial, not less. I went on to explain how the principles could be adapted, building smaller emergency reserves while paying down high-interest debt, using technology to automate saving and investing, leveraging community resources and shared economies to reduce living costs. The details change, I concluded, but the architecture remains. Security before growth, patience over impulse, sustainability rather than flash. These aren't outdated concepts. They're the very foundations that will help you navigate the unique challenges your generation faces. The session ran long, with students lingering afterward to continue the conversation. As I packed up my materials, the dean approached, clearly pleased. "That was exactly what we hoped for," he said. "Not a lecture, but a genuine exchange of wisdom." Several faculty members attended as well. I noticed them taking notes right alongside the students. The following sessions built upon this foundation, each exploring different aspects of financial life. For the final class, I invited Rebecca to join me, creating a multi-generational perspective on wealth building. Together, we shared the story of our own financial reconciliation, how her initial dismissal of my approach had evolved into a deeper understanding through crisis and recovery. We were careful to present it not as her failure or my triumph, but as a journey of mutual growth and shared wisdom. "I called my father financially useless 2 years ago," Rebecca admitted to the stunned students. "I believed that aggressive growth and leveraged investments were the only path to success. When the market collapsed, I discovered the value of his more balanced approach, not because it maximized returns in good times, but because it survived bad ones." A student raised his hand. "So which approach is right, conservative or aggressive?" "Both and neither," I replied. Financial wisdom isn't about dogmatically following one approach. It's about understanding the principles beneath the approaches and applying them appropriately to your unique situation and goals. Rebecca nodded. "The mistake I made wasn't in pursuing growth. It was in dismissing security as outdated. True financial wisdom balances both, building a foundation strong enough to support the growth you pursue." After the final session, the dean hosted a small reception where students could continue the conversation in a more informal setting. I was touched by how many approached to share how the series had impacted their thinking, not just about finance, but about intergenerational learning and respect. One young man lingered until most others had left. "My grandfather tried to teach me similar principles," he admitted quietly. "I dismissed him as out of touch. After your series, I called to apologize and ask if his offer to teach me was still open." His words struck a deep chord. In that moment, I realized the impact extended far beyond financial education. It was about bridging generational divides, about respecting wisdom earned through experience while still embracing innovation and change. That evening, Rebecca, Aaron, and Jamie joined me for dinner at my home. As we sat in the garden enjoying dessert under the stars, Rebecca raised her glass. "To the professor," she said with a smile, "who would have thought that being called financially useless would lead to teaching financial wisdom at a university?" We laughed together. The pain of that moment now transformed into something meaningful and positive. "I've been thinking," Rebecca continued, her expression growing more serious, "about expanding the educational component of our practice. The university series showed there's a real hunger for financial wisdom that goes beyond technical knowledge." "What are you envisioning?" I asked. "A foundation," she explained, "focused on intergenerational financial literacy, free workshops for families, resources for schools, mentoring programs pairing experienced investors with young adults." Aaron nodded enthusiastically. "We've already discussed potential funding sources. My company could develop the digital platform pro bono." I considered the proposal thoughtfully. "It's ambitious," I noted, "but worthwhile. Financial literacy is perhaps the most valuable legacy we can offer, not just to our own family, but to others who haven't had access to such knowledge." "Will you help us build it?" Rebecca asked, not just as an advisor, but as a founding board member. Looking at my daughter, confident, purposeful, and now carrying forward financial wisdom in her own unique way, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with her harsh words had come full circle, transforming into something neither of us could have imagined. "I'd be honored," I replied simply. In the months that followed, the Harrison Family Financial Literacy Foundation took shape. We started small weekend workshops in community centers, online resources for young families, mentoring partnerships with local schools.
The university continued the lecture series, expanding it to include other experienced financial professionals willing to share their hard-won wisdom. What struck me most was how the foundation brought together people across generational, economic, and social divides. Retirees shared insights with college students. Successful entrepreneurs mentored struggling small business owners. Families learned together, with children as young as Jamie participating in age-appropriate activities about saving, giving, and thoughtful spending. 1 year after the foundation's launch, we held a celebration in the garden of the Victorian that housed Generations Wealth Advisors. As I looked around at the diverse group gathered there, clients, students, community members, and family, I reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought us here. From a painful insult delivered across a lunch table to a thriving foundation dedicated to sharing financial wisdom, it was a transformation I could never have predicted, but now treasured beyond measure. Jamie tugged at my hand, pulling me toward a small table where children were planting seeds in little pots, the foundation's metaphor for growing wealth through patience and care. "Grandpa," he said earnestly, "I'm teaching them about the treasure, the kind that grows." I knelt beside him, watching as he carefully explained to another child how to plant the seed at just the right depth. Not too shallow, not too deep. His small hands worked with surprising precision, his expression serious and focused. "See," he said to his new friend, "you have to be patient. The growing happens under the ground first, where you can't see it. But it's still growing." In that moment, hearing my own financial philosophy translated through a child's understanding of gardening, I felt the true power of legacy. It wasn't about the money or assets that would one day pass to the next generation. It was about the wisdom, the values, and the perspective that would guide them long after I was gone. Rebecca joined us, watching Jamie with evident pride. "He listens more than we realize," she said softly. "Just like I was listening, even when you thought I wasn't." That evening, after the celebration had ended and the guests had departed, Rebecca, Aaron, Jamie, and I sat in the garden behind the Victorian. The stars emerged above us, timeless and constant despite the changing world below. "I never thanked you properly," Rebecca said suddenly. "Not just for the financial help when we needed it, but for how you provided it. You could have bailed us out unconditionally. Instead, you taught us to rebuild properly." "The best help isn't a handout," I replied. "It's a foundation," Aaron nodded thoughtfully. "That's what we're really doing with the foundation, isn't it? Not just teaching financial techniques, but helping people build foundations that can support whatever dreams they choose to pursue." The conversation continued as darkness deepened around us. We spoke of the foundation's future, of Jamie's education, of new initiatives at Rebecca's firm, and developments at Aaron's company. Throughout it all ran a common thread: the balance between growth and security, between innovation and wisdom, between the lessons of the past and the possibilities of the future. As I looked at my family in the soft garden lighting, I reflected on how completely my relationship with Rebecca had transformed since that painful moment when she had called me financially useless. What had begun as an insult had initiated a journey of mutual growth and understanding that extended far beyond our family, touching countless lives through the foundation and Rebecca's practice. I thought of all the people who had attended our workshops, the students who had participated in the lecture series, the families now building stronger financial foundations because of principles passed down through generations of our family. The ripple effect would continue long after I was gone, touching lives I would never know. In that moment, I understood the true meaning of wealth, not measured in dollars or investments, but in wisdom shared, in relationships healed, and in legacies that transcend generations. From financially useless to the founder of a financial literacy foundation, the transformation wasn't just in titles or roles, but in the profound recognition that true value lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we share. Jamie had fallen asleep in Rebecca's lap, his expression peaceful under the starlit sky. Tomorrow he would plant more seeds, both literal and metaphorical. Tomorrow the foundation would reach more families. Tomorrow Rebecca would guide more clients toward financial wisdom that balanced growth with security. And I would be there, not as the central figure, but as the foundation upon which others could build their own unique contributions. The role I had always been meant to play. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.